Hello, Culture Matters podcast. We're back again with another Beyond Order Rule 10. Before I introduce the rule, here's a quote just for this episode. Something we cannot see protects us from something we do not understand. The thing we cannot see is culture in its intrapsychic or internal manifestation. The thing we do not understand is the chaos that gave rise to culture. If the structure of culture is disrupted unwittingly, chaos returns. We will do anything to defend ourselves against that return. Rule 10, plan and work diligently to maintain the romance in your relationship. I think this rule could also be named plan and work diligently to maintain meaning in your life. Another way of looking at it. It's, you know, being I've listened and re-listened and read this rule that so many times, and one of the biggest gut punches with this rule to me is in the sense it's it's integrating the integration, or what does the relationship that we can develop, the potential of our relationship that we can develop with our spouse actually do for our individuality, actually do for our self. And I think one of the main arguments that Dr. Peterson is making in this rule is that we aren't actually a self in the absence of the integration of our self with another self, with this commitment, with this vow, with this interwoven dichotomy, this the in the absence of a relationship with our significant other, a relationship where we can relate, where we can and do and willingly desire and are capable of relating to one another. Negotiation versus tyranny and slavery. In the absence of that integration, that interwoven experience, that admixture of chaos and order, what I perceive as chaos is in my counterpart, they're perceiving chaos in me, and maybe it's flipped. My order to their chaos to my order, and and that being flipped reveals is what reveals the truth, not only of the world but of each other. And there's practical tips or tactics or there's practical wisdom in Rule 10 of how to actually maintain the romance in one's relationship. But there's a deeper conversation here of like what actually is romance. Do relationships act like, what does it actually take to get to romance? And is romance just a pleasure, aesthetic, uh, uh, obsession, or um, uh, instinctual desire, or instinctual impulse? That's not the argument that Dr. Peterson is making. In fact, the sexual aspect of the partnership is at the very end of the chapter, and it has a relationship with play. And there's how can we play if we're not, and be at ease to play and be at ease to be vulnerable and intimate and one in this physical conflict that will take place, that will paradoxically bring us closer together. There's a physical conflict that paradoxically brings us, we're it's like there's a destructive breaking aspect to it that's actually bringing both parties physically, emotionally, spiritually, psychologically, physiologically, in the pride product of the offspring, closer together. But there's a conflict in that. There's a destructive element in that. There's a combative element in that. That's at the end of the chapter. The main focus on the chapter are the rituals, the concept of what a relationship actually represents for each of us. And it's this, and I think there's a crescendo happening in the book where rule 10 is plan and work diligently to maintain the romance in your relationship. Because rule 10, if we go through each rule, we're not going to get to rule 10 and be able to do it effectively if we're breaking rules 1 through 9. I think that's implicit in the book. So, rule 1, do not carelessly denigrate social institutions and creative achievements. If you haven't put in the work to understand yourself, your place in society, your and you're just stuck in the victim revolutionary mindset, at what degree are you sane enough to actually participate and benefit from a relationship with a significant other? Rule 2, imagine who you could be and aim single-mindedly at that. Without the less clear one is on who they are and who they're attempting to become and what role they're going to play in their own life and in society, how is one going to be able to be emotionally and mentally capable of negotiating in a relationship versus abdicating that responsibility or tyrannizing their counterpart? Rule 3, do not hide unwanted things in the fog. The part of one of the more powerful things in Rule 10 around telling the truth with one's spouse, like actually, when you need your spouse the most, they'll be there relative to how honest you've been with one another, how honest you've been with them, and how honest they've been with you, and how aligned both of you are. Do not hide unwanted things in the fog. If we're carrying around unwanted things in the fog and are not and have not let our spouses in at the degree necessary for them to understand, it's like in a business. You have a business partner and they don't understand the balance sheet, and they don't understand the profit and loss, and they aren't privy to the financials. And one partner could be completely defrauding the organization, misappropriating funds, changing the numbers so that the other partner has no idea what type of malevolence they're under. People doing that in one's relationship is a pathway to tyranny, is a pathway to slavery, is a pathway to hell for both parties. And that's one of the arguments that Peterson is making, is that it's a pathway to hell for the tyrant even to have slaves, because now they're missing a fundamental component to their own sanity and their own salvation as an individual by not having a relationship of equal, but a relationship of subordinate, or slave to master, master to slave. It's that telling the truth and living in truth, that a healthy, constructive, value add relationship according to plan and work diligently to maintain the romance in your relationship connotes vulnerability, transparency, trust, honesty, care, empathy, um, vulnerability. I didn't say that already. And will lead, responsibility, the ability to. So one of the recommendations in the rules, this is something very practical for anyone in an actual marriage or an intimate relationship, is to actually celebrate the rituals of like a date night or time to come together and to talk through one's week, one's day, um, to actually just talk, to think. And when businesses, if you listen to the Culture Matters podcast with frequency, when businesses don't come together, have team meetings where all parties can speak freely and say what they think without repercussions, and what they share, um, what's working, what's not working, what needs to be addressed, and can work and could come together to speak freely and think freely and figure out who's responsible for this, who's responsible for that. The longer the time that goes by where the team is not meeting and talking through these things, more and more and more contradictions build up in the organization. There's more and more things that have to be worked out at a later date, which makes it even more anxiety creating, even more difficult to talk about those things and address those important things in the future, because there's the more and more anxiety, the more and more personal, the more and more reactive the group is, the less and less emotional responsibility is enacted in the conversation, the more reactive and personal it becomes, and the less the things, the what's and the hows and the whys are discussed, and the more so the who's are discussed, and the who's in the room and the who's not out of the room, and especially when it's the who's not out of the room, that it just becomes a whole cluster F of talking about those that are not in the room, that have or haven't done this or that can't defend themselves, and nothing gets done in the meeting, is a consequence of a lack of clarity of responsibility, a lack of meeting frequently enough at an effective degree, a lack of vulnerability and transparency and trust and clarity and responsibility in the leadership. And so one of the recommendations in Rule 10 is, like, on a personal level, are you are we meeting as a couple? And then how often? And then, okay, well, how? And many couples would say that, there's a hell of a lot of reasons why we wouldn't meet. And the same thing goes for a business. There's a hell of a lot of it. Like, one of the reasons that a company wouldn't meet is if it's actually getting a lot of things done and making things happen. Success creates that entitlement. Like, we're not meeting. We're on the same page. We have trust. We believe in one another. We know what our responsibilities are. So we're just working towards our personal goals and working to follow our KPIs. And we know what we need to do, and we know we don't need to do. And we're bought in, and we're all vibing, and we're making it happen. And now we're getting all these results that's changing the entire dynamic of the business, changing the entire governance structure. And so the governance has to evolve and adapt to the change in the environment, because there's more customers, or there's new products and services that have been developed, and there's more staff, and not everyone knows each other. In the beginning, it was a small business. There was buy-in, there was belief, there was chutzpah, there was values, there was sacrifice, there was engagement, there was competence, there was intellect, there was trust, there was mutual respect. It's go, go, go. Everyone's working. We don't need to have team meetings. We are all on the same page. We know exactly what we need to do. We know exactly what we're not doing. Our job descriptions might not be totally clear, but we're doing every job possible, because we're doing everything that just needs to get done to get it done and make it happen. The the great thing about that is there's an engaged ownership, there's responsibility, it's not being advocated, right? So we're not succumbing to Rule 4. We may be hiding unwanted things in the fog, but we're leveraging that angst to actually get shit done and make things happen. It's almost like it's a projection of the unreconciled conflicts of the individuals in the wrapped up in the individual's unconscious, that's manifesting through the energy necessary to actually create that momentum, create that business. We've followed Rule 2. Imagine who you could be, named single-mindedly at that. There's absolutely, even if the vision is not explicit, it's it's at degrees of explicit. It's represented in the behavior of ownership and the behavior of the founders, that there's excitement around this idea, there's sacrifice around this idea. These are unique and special people. Like, that's how people are perceiving the beginning. The original employees, the original customers. These are unique and special people that are clearly going to be something far in the future, and I'm going to be a part of this. There's no time to denigrate social institutions or creative achievements. There's no the resentment hasn't overtaken and led to an abdication of responsibility and a talking against society and the world. And if there is, that's a narrative that, like, we're doing something about it. There's an equal of degree of responsibility or effort and sacrifice in the face of this greater unknown and this greater theme that we're fighting, and we're fighting together. So it's in that apprenticeship phase from a behavioral standpoint, pursuing the goal and pursuing me, and that's creating meaning for the people around the founders that are seeing their values lived out and seeing the activity and seeing the sacrifice. And so there's nothing to abdicate as far as responsibility, because there's nothing has been created yet. There is no, the environment hasn't made it easier. It's the environment is still making it hard, which is forcing responsibility, the ability to respond. We're either going to win or we're going to fail. We're either going to make this happen or we're going to have nothing. There's no business yet. There's no profit yet. There's no success yet. There's no brand yet. There's no perceived influence and authority yet. There's just us against the world. And that's that founding, exciting energy of that small team that is doing every job, making everything happen. And now, like, it's so synchronous, uh, synonymous. There's like a synchronicity with like the beginnings of a relationship that we're not really clear on. It's on our roles and our responsibilities, but it just, we believe in one another. We're both vibing. We're both moving in a unified direction. There's this feeling of alignment. There's this excitement and euphoria and this destiny or fate or in, there's this deep impact that's driving both parties together, and they're just moving through life, like through each, one another's life, interweaving through life. And there isn't yet, it's like us against the world, similar to that founder mentality, that founder culture. Like that, we're doing anything and everything for one another, trying to court one another and show our best to one another and build this life, even if it's not explicit. It's like build this life together. In the beginning of a relationship, that is the unspoken, that is implicit in the relationship. Is like, you go to the movies together on date night, and Peterson talks about this in Rule 10, and you watch that movie and you think, that fairy tale movie, that romantic movie, that love story, you think, both people are thinking, am I sitting next to the one? Am I sitting next to the one? It's in, even if they're not thinking, or they're thinking, I gotta get the hell out of here, I'm definitely not sitting next to the one. But there's that, because there will only be one in that monogamous relationship, in that covenant, in that. And this is the whole point of this rule, is it's an overwhelming thought, an overwhelming point. And I think I've digressed all the business stuff to just try to conceptualize it. We're not yet an individual, in the absence of finding. It's not just finding or attracting, it's committing to our concept of the one. There could be 100 million people in the world that are your one of the 7 billion. So there's a never ending amount of potential quotes, the ones. Are you the type, am I, or you, or whoever's listening to this, capable of choosing and deciding one? What does that say about you? What does it say about us? What does it say about our potential to navigate the future and live to our potential? Our partner, our mate, is, they reveal aspects of who we are, the good, the bad, the ugly, and relative to how honest we are with them and how committed we are to the process of growing with them, our potential will be revealed. And even more subtly, our potential for malevolence will be tempered. It's like, would a non-corrupt, a spouse that was not corrupt, let someone become corrupt? Well, no. They'll do everything they can, fight, claw, beg, reason. This is where the negotiation piece is. It's like, don't tyrannize, don't victimize, negotiation. The strong counterpart is not going to let their counterpart stray from truth, stray from the good, stray from virtue, stray from what is just, what is right. They're going to do everything they can to make sure that the individual in the pursuit of their potential, of their journey to power, their journey to responsibility, stays responsible relative to that authority, influence, power, relative to the natural consequences of nature giving the an individual that gets authority, influence, and power opportunity to betray themselves and betray others. The partner will help temper that. It's like an elevate. It's like a physiological expression of conscience, or an accountability mechanism to conscience, an accountability mechanism to responsibility. It's like if the CEO's there, you have your partner, which is like the operating like a board to check and balance to make sure the CEO is following the business plan and actualizing the vision, and is being prudent with the finances, and listening and telling the truth at the degree necessary for the organization to innovate and get better. The one's partner operates as that accountability governor, and that relationship between the individual, their spouse, and their conscience, it plays they play they all interrelate with one another. And so Peterson's trying to make, and I was going on this whole thing about, the beginning, because part of the advice here is like, if let's say you like the analogy that founding business is the same intuitive, impulsive, exciting, euphoric energy as the beginning of a relationship that just really aligns people, that it's almost like that's a good match. They're complement they're different but complementary, and it works, and it's clearly a strong, it's that quote unquote honeymoon phase. Once there's especially when you involve a child and you involve responsibilities and obligations, now you've got to get clear on, there's some helpful tactics, just like with a business. What are the job descriptions? Whose role is what? Whose title's what? This might be more mundane, arbitrary shit that you don't want to think about or hear about. It's like, when are we going on dates? How often are we going to perform sexual intercourse? It's like thinking about, it's funny to even say, it's like, how are we stripping away the beauty in love by relegating these conversations to, like, or deducing these conversations, breaking them down in some reductionist, materialistic fashion? I don't think so, if the communication is honest and transparent and real. And I think that's a big part of what Peterson is saying here is, and I could speak from this from experience in a business context, like when business partners don't tell each other the truth and are not able to negotiate, and they avoid the tough conversations, they end up projecting on others, and then it makes it even harder for them to negotiate and work together towards that main goal. And business partnerships break up, and it's one of the biggest destroyers of value for small business is business partnership breakups and divorces. Actually, those are the two biggest destroyers of value of small business cultures, is business partnership breakups and divorces. Obviously, divorce is prevalent in our society, so it's clear that this would be an important rule in Beyond Order, right? That rule number 10. But some the point here is that, just like a small business goes through that founding period where everyone's bought into the personality of the founders, to the energy in the room, to the sacrifices, to the actual value proposition, and there's less meetings because there's more just like excitement and things are happening. Once there becomes an actual organization, there's got a certain amount of customers, a certain amount of employees. There needs to be an org chart. Descriptions are going to have to be clear. Hierarchy is going to have to be clear. who's in charge, who isn't, what are their roles, how are they held accountable, and then meetings. We got to have those rituals, just like in a personal relationship. Peterson is making the point that it's not a good idea to not go on dates, and that couples that end up in counseling might say, "Oh, we can't go on dates. We're just going to fight. It's going to be terrible." And he's making the point that if the first 15 dates are not effective, um, you could end up having 3,000 plus dates in your lifetime. So it's a pretty simple math equation. Just figure out how many times a week you'd go out times if it's once a week, right? It's 50, let's just say 50 weeks a year. You could see how you have a certain amount of into the thousands opportunities to date. If you're going to have 30 bad dates or 20 bad dates or 15 bad dates, to have thousands of quality, you're spending the time together anyway. It's about the intention and paying attention to one another and having this. It's really mind-boggling to think about how obvious this is, but when not spoken or thought about, how redundant relationships become, and how mundane, and how the missed opportunity. It's like having a partner that knows you because you've shown yourself to them, that complements you and is working with you together towards the future, is a superpower. It's part of the supernatural essence of being a human, beyond just nature, beyond just what other mammals and animals have. It's maybe part of what makes us human and unique and special, is to have this commitment with another that can help us grow and get better exponentially, because we've let them in and they've let us in, and we're working together towards. It's an exponential growth curve. But I guess, in closing, for the plan and work diligently to maintain the romance in your relationship, or plan and work diligently to create meaning in your life, is it's going to take obviously it's going to take a lot of work, but I think rule 4, right? If you're abdicating responsibility, you're less likely to be diligent in your relationship. If you're doing what you hate, you're less likely to plan and work diligently to maintain the romance in your relationship. If you've adopted some ideology that's stripped away your ability to be an individual, then you're less likely to plan and work diligently to maintain the romance in your relationship. If you haven't picked something to work as hard as you possibly can, work as hard as you possibly can, um, tr- try and try and work as hard as you possibly can. At least one thing is, yeah, work as hard as you possibly can. At least one thing, and see what happens. If you haven't picked something to go deep in and master, you haven't tried to make at least one room in your home as beautiful as possible, right? If you're not paying attention to your own domicile and your own surroundings and putting effort and having a broader purview over like the greater unknown. If your old memories still upset you and you haven't written them down carefully and completely, if you're too busy denigrating social institutions and creative achievements, if you don't have an aim and you're not aiming towards the future and you're just focused on all of the right now and wrapped up in the past and reacting emotionally and deconstructing and destroying everything in your path, you're not going to work diligently to maintain the romance in your relationship. And of course, rule 11, you're going to let yourself become resentful, deceitful, and arrogant. So it's like, I don't think I've made a strong enough point actually for the value of a relationship or the spousal relationship in this. I don't think I've actually made a strong enough point, but I think that's likely just a consequence of where I am in my journey as a married man and someone in a relationship, learning the hard way, trials and tribulations. So I would say that the takeaway, one of the practical takeaways for this rule is don't let the rituals go by. Make sure you have the rituals. The date nights are more than just date nights. They're a component of the actual relationship and your individuality. Negotiation, negotiation, negotiation. Just like you don't want to let unwanted things hide in the fog, bring up and talk about everything possible and work through it with your partner and clarify whose role is what and in what way and how that benefits the household and work together as a team to do so and make time for so this we never got to this part. It was the whole point of the sexual aspect and the romance is romance and play. I want to say this for you, and romance and play have a relationship, but we're not going to play where it's equally beneficial and it's real and authentic and safe and aligned and genuine if both parties are holding back, if we're in fight or flight, if there's deceits in the relationship, lies, omissions, and a lack of trust and respect, just like any business partnership, then it is going to just be a physical relationship that won't lead to the highest and best utility for both parties. It will just be a physical relationship. And that is actually an inevitability. Physical relationships happen, then people have lots of kids, and then they're surprised when those kids become um, fatherless and motherless when the people don't actually get along because there wasn't enough time and sacrifice invested in the partnership. It was instinctual and intuitive. It's something like the business failed because the go-go phase, when everyone was excited about the new product or service and everyone bought into the idea, the customers and employees, once it got big enough where there was responsibilities and there needed to be job descriptions and titles and move from reactive, you know, reactive impulse and intuition and imagination to proactive insight, reason, responsibility, the whole business exploded. And many of these things could be much of this, just like any small business that is most small businesses fail because of issues in management, even more so than their products and services being garbage. It's issues in management. So if the management could be addressed, right? If the marriage or the relationship could be addressed, um, then it's ultimately much more successful for all shareholders. And that's one of the toughest pills to swallow, right? It's if as individuals we don't stay committed in the relationship or in the marriage and we leave it, but we don't learn the lessons that led us to leave or led it to fail, then what's the likelihood that we'll keep repeating the mistake? And that's the point of this whole rule and maybe this whole book and a lot of Peterson's work that everyone seems to be, not everyone, but a lot of people seem to be fascinated by his work. If you don't learn the lessons, you end up repeating the mistakes. It's that Carl Jung quote about, if we don't make the unconscious conscious, we'll end up repeating it and then we'll call that destiny. I'm paraphrasing. Share this with a friend, plan and work diligently to maintain the romance of your relationship. And we will see you next time in Rule 11.